Hi everyone, my name is Mark Vollmer and I'm here on the Learning Couch with my colleague Kate Vandervoort. Her company is called Social Mediology, and one of the things we're going to be taking a look at today is how does social media play into your business and how can we make the most of working in the social media space in this ever-changing environment. So Kate, welcome to this evening.
Thank you, Mark.
It's great to have you here with us.
Great to be
Can you
here.
tell us a little bit about your business? What is it that you do?
Sure. Most of what I do is coaching. So I work with businesses on the culture change really that needs to happen to embrace these new technologies. It really requires a different kind of mindset. So I'll work with a company for 3 to 6 months on really embedding social media and all the systems and processes into the company or into the business, and to help them really look at it from the perspective that it needs to be looked at. So.
Right. And it sounds from talking with you earlier, I understand that the concept of social media and marketing is not just do the same old stuff and do it electronically. So tell me a little bit, what do I need to learn if I'm going to make the adjustment?
Yeah, look, gone are the days where we just talk louder and louder and hope that the right people hear us. You know, marketing traditionally has been very much a broadcast style of communication, and social media requires, I guess, a paradigm shift. It really turns a lot of those traditional principles on their head. And the first one is really that, you know, people's current best customers or best students or best colleagues, best staff, lead them to their next best customer. So it sounds really simple, but it's often one of the ones that companies or businesses get wrong, is that they think, we'll try social media over here, let's protect our current databases and our current customers. We don't want to muddy the waters with them. They already buy our product or use our service. But by the very nature of siloing it off to the side, you're missing all of those opportunities. So to connect with your best customer, they lead you to more people like them. Right. And delivering value and answering questions for them and meeting the needs that they might have really leads you to your next best customer. So that's one of the principles, I guess, that we always talk about, that businesses often miss. Right.
Well, in the old school, it was if you had a happy customer, you'd get repeat business. And it was always more profitable, more advantageous to get that repeat customer. What you've described, though, is that if I know that I'm doing well with my customer, I shouldn't just isolate that and pretend to do something different. I should leverage off of that.
Well, and often people go, let's use social media to find new customers, new target audiences.
Yeah, which is very expensive, and it's like
and
fishing.
On social media, yeah, absolutely. And on social media, you know, we're connected to more people like us. So we tend to be connected to people with the same economic background or economic situation, with the same education background. We might be connected to people that live in the same geographical area. I'm connected to a whole lot of women who are mothers because I have 2 young children.
Sure.
So if I'm your ideal customer, I'm connected to a whole lot more of your ideal customers. So it's a very simple concept, but one that often businesses miss.
So one of the things that comes to my mind is, how much science do you now have to apply? Because that could be a pretty daunting task. I'm a learning and development professional. I'm a member of ILP, so I've got lots of people that I can relate to and certainly, connect with. But how much science and, do I need to learn statistics and all of that stuff?
Look, there's a lot of people in my industry that try and complicate the heck out of this and put up smoke and mirrors and make it look really complicated. Okay. And it is. There's work involved in making social media work. There's no question. Right. Gone are the days of the wild, wild west where you flick a switch and there's thousands of people waiting to buy your product on social media. Sure. It doesn't work that way. But there are some fundamentals around, if you deliver good quality content that adds value to your customers, and that they engage with that content, they lead you to your next best customers. So a lot of it is relationship. And so small business do particularly well on social media if they can authentically tell their story and be genuine in their relationships and deliver value. They can do exceptionally well from social media in a very simple way. It doesn't require a lot of, some of the most successful people on social media are stay-at-home mums who are sewing clothes And,
I can see an awful
they don't
lot.
know the statistics and the psychology behind it, but they relate to people.
So it's mostly about having a story, being authentic. I mean, those are the keys I hear you talking to. And also not making it bigger than Ben-Hur in the classic sense of you can dip your toe in the water. Is that a safe? Okay.
Yeah.
And you can explore as you go. What's the risk of getting it wrong and then having to dig your way back out again? Is there a risk there?
Oh, look, there are certainly risks in social media. When you turn on the television every morning and you see the latest social media crisis that's unfolding
Sure.
for someone. And it's not only big companies that suffer those. You know, some very small businesses have gotten it wrong and things have gone pear-shaped for them. But at the heart of it, if businesses and people are authentic and genuine and respectful in their communications with people,
Right.
you can generally, find the safe path on social media. And I was just having this conversation with someone just a moment ago. There's no doubt that there's a shadow side to social media. You've got your keyboard warriors and your people that, enjoy sitting down with a glass of red wine and attacking whoever the latest poor person or company is that's, getting their attention. But generally, when we work with businesses around crisis management and reputation management, it's just about clear, honest communication. And if you treat people with respect, you tend to not be able to go wrong.
I've seen a lot of that learning that comes out of when there is a, call it a marginal disaster of some magnitude, but certainly where something has gone pear-shaped. And I can still, even in my level, I can see some companies responding well, and they get right on top of it. They keep a public face. And then I see the other companies who try to bury it, hide it, pretend it didn't happen, which I think is just a phenomenal logic behind that. And they actually exacerbate. They just make the situation worse because customers get twice as upset under the heading of, well, you screwed up once, but now your recovery is shot.
Yes.
Yeah. So it sounds to me like you've said.
And the more you try and retract and batten down the hatches and pretend it didn't happen, the bigger the disaster will be.
Right.
Because the moment something happens, it's screenshotted. My industry is notorious for the moment someone messes up online, they take screenshots and write blogs about how terrible that, social media crisis that may not have yet unfolded, how terrible that is. So once it happens, the quicker you can be authentic, fess up, apologise, but continue to communicate.
Sure.
That tends to give you the path of least resistance through that. And there was a beautiful scenario recently. Dan from Optus, he's now legendary. I don't know if you heard of his efforts, but there was a whole lot of racist comments that were happening on the Optus page about posters that were up in Arabic in certain suburbs.
Oh, right.
And people were being vile. It was some of the worst behaviour, people saying horrendous things about being Australian. And Dan, whether he was endorsed to do this by Optus or not, he just responded in the most human, authentic and genuine way and called people on their behaviour.
Right.
And he got headhunted by about 30 different companies and has
In a
since
heartbeat?
left Optus.
Oh my goodness.
But whether whether that was the culture that Optus has in terms of responding or whether it was just a lone social media manager who fought the good fight.
Talk about rising to the occasion.
Absolutely.
And possibly outperforming what would have been the canned response of, we'll look into that. Lots of danger. So what I hear you talking about is you can dip your toe in the water, you can get started, but it's also important to at least think through what's my recovery strategy if something does go a little bit wrong or doesn't go exactly to plan.
Yeah, and the easiest way to do that is scenario planning. So have a think about what are the complaints that may happen about you or your business, and whether they come through by email or by telephone or in person, and then plan out if that unfolded on social media, what would I do about that? And you know what? The plans that you put in place, that won't be what happens. But what it does is it gets you in the mind, the mindset of thinking about how to respond.
Perfect. What I'd like to do is take a short break, but when we come back, let's talk a little bit about that process, because I think that will help people at least understand that there is a methodology, and like you said, it may not be airtight, but it'll help you get started in a safe way.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Great.
Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. My name's Mark, and I'm here with Kate, and we're taking a look at the application of social media. One of the things you started to talk about, Kate, was that there is a little bit of logic to this stuff. There's a bit of a process. It may not be airtight, but there are things there are things that we can do to get involved. I guess the first part of that question is, I'm really busy all day long. I got long days. I don't have time for this. How do I establish a bit of that process, but not turn it into another, dead weight that I gotta find time for?
And don't get me wrong, there is a huge amount of strategy in social media to make it work. But I guess my point was that particularly for smaller businesses or sole practitioners or consultants or trainers, so particularly in the industry that we're talking about, often if we try and make it too big and too complicated, it prevents people from doing anything.
Yeah.
And you're right, it is as simple as putting a toe in the water. So whether it's LinkedIn, which might be the most appropriate place for a trainer or a facilitator or a learning and development professional to be, or whether they have a larger strategy where they want to tap into a number of different platforms. The key is to find, and generally I say, ask your current customers, ask your current colleagues, ask the people that you're currently connected with where they are. And
so go back to your source.
Yeah, and where do they want to see the kind of content or the value that you're going to create for them? Where do they want to receive that? Where do they want to see it?
Okay.
And most people won't say email because most people are so bombarded by email.
Yep.
So it's about finding the moments and the places and the types of content that are going to work for your audience. And starting small, if it's one blog a month and you build a network on LinkedIn, then that's one way to get into social media. And then, you find that you get some success off the back of that. You might then find that there are communities on Facebook that really have engaged your target audience. So you might then move into that. So I can imagine other people in my industry screaming at the thought that I might say there's, no method in the madness and that it's just jump on in.
Sure.
But I'm also really about demystifying it and helping people to take action and do something.
Okay.
Because it can feel very overwhelming otherwise.
Well, yeah, the inertia piece is going to definitely be something that I would suspect most small businesses would have to deal with, in that it looks very messy. You hear lots of war stories, and we were just talking during the break about other scenarios where it's gone fairly ugly fairly quickly. The volatility in this space is that because of the splat factor, you don't have a lot of recovery time, and you've talked a little bit about that already. So if I know my customers and I know my best customers, and then I find out, or I maybe chat with them, as you said, it's based on the relationship, where do they spend their energy or where do they poke around in social media, that's maybe at least a starting place.
Yes.
Play in that space where my good customers already are.
Absolutely. And then the key is, what content can you create that adds value? Because it's through content that's shared that your customers or your potential customers engage with that content.
Right.
Other people see that engagement, so they lead you to more people like them. So it's asking the question of, what is the value that I add here?
Okay.
We were just speaking in the break a bit about, becoming an industry expert. So how do you find your niche? How do you find the unique messaging that you have as a business or as an individual, and how do you share that in small, bite-sized, digestible pieces of information?
Yeah, you definitely need to crawl before you have to worry about sprinting.
Yeah, well, and also thinking that we're so bombarded with content nowadays that it's the small, I often talk about the things that evoke an emotive response.
Yeah.
We are so bombarded with content that it's the things that inspire, that educate, that make us happy, that make us sad, that make us laugh. They're the pieces of content that people want. So if you've got a 5-page article that theorises about something really important and valuable, how do you convert that into small, bite-sized, visually appealing, easy to share pieces of content? Because that will lead people on the journey to connecting with you.
My sense is that also means that I don't have to be a world expert. I have to be an expert relative to my customers.
Absolutely.
Is that a fair call?
Absolutely.
So I don't have to try to compare myself to an internationally renowned New York Times bestseller author, blah, blah, blah. I have to connect with my customers to see what will add value to them. And that gives me a platform to work off of, and as you said, bite-sized pieces. Because LinkedIn, I can write a small article, but if I'm tweeting, I got 140 characters. So that's going to be...
You can write your small article and then you can tweet about it.
I was going to say, that's going to be a real bite-sized piece.
Yeah.
So what are the different channels? I've seen your website. It's very graphically laid out, so it's very enticing. I mean, we have all sorts of different mediums in the social space, and I suspect that there would be more coming, and some will drop in, some will drop out. What are the main channels that you see customers looking at or utilizing, or where do you see companies, small to medium companies, really making a presence?
So professionally, LinkedIn is obviously the place, particularly in this industry, that people want to be on.
Sure.
And LinkedIn is beautiful because it's very clear in its purpose. It's professional networking. So it's not the place to share your wedding photo, to have the video of cats playing pianos. In fact, rarely should you, unless you're the RSPCA, share a video of cats playing pianos. Although there was International Cat Day the other day, and I did share a video of a cat playing a piano because I've said that line so many times I couldn't miss the opportunity
couldn't resist
to celebrate International Cat Day. Although I am allergic to cats, so it was a one-day celebration.
It was a moment.
I digress. So LinkedIn is very clear in its purpose. It's about professional networking. And in learning and development, it's all about those professional connections. And the beauty about LinkedIn is that unlike some of the other platforms that require a really comprehensive content calendar, LinkedIn is as much or as little as you want to share. So you can share an article a day, you could write an article a day, you could do it once a week, even once a month, you would still see some value from LinkedIn. So it's the low-hanging fruit, particularly for learning and development professionals.
Right.
Because it's a low barrier to entry, very easy to have some good success on that. Particularly if you connect with everybody that you come in contact with professionally.
Right. So that would make sense then, because I'm thinking I've only got maybe 150 contacts, so if I produce something, it's only going to go out to 150 people. How do I get beyond that in terms of visibility or touch points?
Well, if you're sharing something that adds value to those people
Right.
and they comment or they choose to share your content, they introduce you to more people like them.
Oh, so it's not the knock-on effect, but it is the connections that follow.
Yes, absolutely. So what I'll often do, so I do two things on LinkedIn that I find work particularly well. I get
Can I take notes now?
Go for it. I probably get 5 to 10 LinkedIn requests a day.
Yeah.
I think particularly in my industry,
That would make sense.
that makes sense. But I will always, so just in the last couple of weeks, I've had a connection from someone in Air New Zealand, someone in Premiers and Cabinet Office. Now, I have no idea why those people are connecting with me. They're not saying anything when they connect, they just send through the connection. So I always write back and say, thanks so much for connecting. Is there anything in particular I can help you with? And sometimes people will say, nope, just interested in social media, so I'm connecting with you.
Right.
And other times they may have sent a connection request to 5 other people in my industry, and I'm the only person that responds and opens up a dialogue. And I can't tell you how much business I get just from responding to people and opening up a conversation. And sometimes they say, I'm not interested right now, but really good to be connected. And they call me 3 months later and say, I'm in the middle of a crisis, I'm interested.
No, yes. No, I really need you.
So the purpose for me to do that is actually establish a relationship, not to sell them anything, but just to investigate what their interest is.
Well, we're going to take another short break. When we come back, I'd love to hear a few more of your quick wins. You said earlier the low-hanging fruit, but that'd be a real opportunity for us to pick up some ideas that we can apply immediately.
Great.
Great, thanks. Welcome back to On the Learning Couch. My name is Mark Vollmer. We're here at the Institute for Learning Professionals, and I really am enjoying our time with Kate Vandervoort of Social Mediology. Kate's specialty is around social media presence and actually making it work for you in a business. And we had gotten 1 out of 2 ideas. Now, can you share with us the second trick or the second tip?
So on LinkedIn, if you're wanting to connect with people, what I'll often do is do a bit of research about if it's a company. And I have to say, I don't do a lot of cold calling. In fact, I don't do any cold calling through LinkedIn. It's really very much about relationship. But I will share content that I know that's of interest to people that I'm wanting to work with or that I'm wanting to collaborate with. So setting up a really good content strategy using something like Feedly, which is an RSS reader, so you can set up all of your folders with all of the topics that you're interested in and have the feed of all of the best blogs in the world that talk about those topics, means that, you know, at the click of a button you can find hundreds of articles about any topic that you're a lead expert in or that you have a niche in. And the key is to be sharing good quality content. So it doesn't always need to be your own content. And that stops a lot of people getting involved in social media as they get really worried about not being able to keep up that level of content. So having a good content aggregation system through Google Media Alerts, through RSS feeds, through Twitter lists, but being able to keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening is critical to making LinkedIn work.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, because one of the things that we talk about, especially in the learning and development field, is there is so much content that's out there and it's not curated very well, which means everybody's out there hunting. So if you take 10 people hunting for a topic, you just multiply and it just becomes a geometric nightmare.
And the word you've used there is curate.
Yeah.
Because people follow me on social media because I read 200 blogs a day about what's happening in social media and share the best of what's available. So people don't need to go and be that expert or that specialist in that area. I much prefer specialist to expert.
Sure.
So that's what you want to set yourself up as, is a content aggregator and a content creator in your own industry or niche.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you. So now that's a little bit about LinkedIn. Are there some other primary channels that either a small to medium enterprise or a me, myself, and I company that we should be paying attention to?
Yeah, look, there's no doubt that Facebook is the big social media platform. You know, there's nothing in the world that connects that many people.
I understand. Yeah, apparently if it was its own country, it would be the second largest country in the world. Yeah,
and it's only continuing to grow. You know, they're putting pilotless aircraft in the air to, you know, have Wi-Fi over third world countries. It's only going to continue to grow. And Facebook, being, you know, one of the early players, have really embedded themselves in our lives. You know, there's a lot of online logins and all of that relates to Facebook. But small businesses in particular, or individuals, should not underestimate the work it takes to make Facebook work. There's a very complex algorithm that sits behind Facebook. We've all, I'm sure, heard over the last couple of years about organic reach declining significantly. And Facebook exists to make money for its shareholders. So the way that they do that is by selling advertising. We had a question from the audience about where the line is around how much you do advertise, and how do you really grow a following or grow a community. I think you were talking in the break about if you've only got a very small group, how do you grow that? And there's no doubt that on Facebook it has to be a combination of organic content and paid content.
Okay.
You know, it's a media channel that we need to pay for.
Right.
The flip side of that, the good side of that, is that there is no more targeted advertising that you can get anywhere. That wasn't very articulate. You cannot get more targeted advertising anywhere than you can on Facebook in particular. Where that's going is really scary or interesting, depending on your
I think
perspective.
it's called Minority Report.
And
Based on your history, it'll tell you where you want to go next.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, Facebook are buying big data in really phenomenal ways. It won't be long before you'll go to Woolworths and swipe your everyday reward card and you've bought an 80-gram tube of toothpaste, that you'll get an ad that shows up on Facebook for a 200-gram tube of McLean's toothpaste or Colgate, whichever brand you bought, because of all of that big data and how they're starting to use it. And it's an interesting one. It's a little bit off topic, but the whole concept of intellectual property and privacy is a really big one for people and something that people are quite nervous about.
It still amazes me how many people do not understand what their digital footprint does look like, especially as they get more and more into social media.
Yeah.
And I do see lots of executives who have that fear of panic about all of my employees are representing what message just because they have a Facebook page. And
Yep.
I know it's actually been to court recently here in Australia where somebody posted a comment on a Facebook page and the next day they were marched into HR because it was reputational brand damage.
The Industrial Relations Court are
It's-
full at the moment of social media cases. And you know that we've just raised a whole lot of topics in that short period of time, but if you don't have a staff social media policy, it is unfair dismissal to dismiss someone because of their behaviour on social media. So it's a kind of another topic, but social media policy is really important
Right.
because as an employer, you're not covered if you dismiss someone for their behaviour. But I think particularly in the learning and development space, the concept of intellectual property and what I own, so someone who has intellectual property, and it's a really big issue in this industry. And my view may not be a particularly popular one, however, privacy and intellectual property are dead as far as I'm concerned. You know, with the internet and the amount of content that's out there, there is very little that doesn't exist in some shape or form.
Right.
So when we talk about content curation or aggregation, it's about how do you take what's already there and put your own slant on it, and that's the value that people derive. But the more we try and control how we use social media and say that's my content and I can't share it because then what are people going to pay me for,
Right.
the less success you'll have in social media. So it's about being open, genuine, sharing content, because through that sharing you will get far greater reach than trying to control your little patch and not allowing people to have what you're wanting to sell. And it's a challenge for facilitators in particular.
Exactly,
Yeah.
because in many cases a facilitator or a learning and development professional, they are very much of the belief that they're being brought in because of who they are and what they're going to contribute. So it is hard to remember that the law of abundance, as opposed to the law of competition,
Yeah.
says that if you're going to be in the social media space, you have to be willing to share.
And all the traffic in my website comes because of the blogs that I've written. So the
Oh,
more
okay.
generous that I am with what I know, when someone's searching for how do you optimise a Facebook page to succeed in business, and they type that into Google and my blog article comes up, then they have the opportunity to see that I do training and coaching and keynote speaking. And whereas if someone typed in social media expert or specialist, I may not come up because I don't
Right.
invest in Google AdWords, etc.
Yep.
So sharing that content and being generous with content is what will lead you to your ideal customers.
So I guess you talked earlier about paradigms, change your mindset, change your framework. If I'm going to be in the social media space, one of the things I do have to get my head around, so to speak, is I have to be willing to give it away, because I'm not giving it away for free. I'm actually doing some business development.
Absolutely.
But it's just a real low-cost business development because I don't have to
Yeah.
print anything.
Yeah,
I just have to
absolutely.
find the time and
Yeah.
maybe a glass of wine. Anyway. Look, when we come back from break, I do want to talk to you a little bit more about some of the other channels, as well as some of the prevention tips that you might have about how do we stay ahead of the game. And I really made a note around the social media policy, because I do know a lot of organizations that they don't want to touch that because they're afraid that that's going to put them in court. So, man, we'll pick that one up. Thank
Great.
you.
Thanks.
Welcome back to the ILPs on the Learning Couch. My name's Mark. I'm here with Kate Vandervoort of Social Mediology. And we're talking about how we can use the tools of social media without necessarily having to reinvent the wheel, and certainly to get the most out of what the social media platforms offer for our business. We talked a little bit about getting into the marketplace. We talked about connecting with clients. I guess what we started to get into was, so what? Is it really going to make a difference? And how can I actually use some of these tools if I really want to make the most out of it? So can you give us a few ideas around that?
Sure. Look, it's absolutely worth it if you're willing to put in the time to find where your audience is and to create your niche. And I think the more we can focus on what is it that I can deliver that adds value, rather than trying to be everything to everybody and be everywhere.
Right.
And the key, I think, that I've found in helping smaller businesses and organisations get into social media is how do you fit it in amongst your day? And, you know, there's some content that can clearly be scheduled in advance. It might be that there's 2 hours the first Monday of the month that you schedule any content that's not time-oriented. Yeah. But if you set up these content feeds where you just constantly have good quality content available to you, it shouldn't be hugely time consuming.
Okay.
And if you can find a way to be sharing great quality content and then invest your time in the relationship building so that when people respond or engage, that you then spend that time, that's where you'll see the most value. But it does take work, and it is about finding you know, how do you genuinely participate in that? The more people try to be everything to everybody and on every platform.
Sure.
And, you know, we were talking about the different kinds of platforms. In the learning and development industry, Twitter is definitely a good place to be.
Right.
It's where you can connect with influencers, with media. It's certainly where you can keep your finger on the pulse about what's happening in your industry. And then the other platforms, they're much more niche. So, you know, Snapchat is great from a consumer perspective if millennials are your target audience.
Okay.
But, you know, if you're working with C-level executives, Snapchat's probably not where you need to be. I love Snapchat because I take photos with my toddler, but, you know, it doesn't particularly help me with my business.
Right.
And Instagram's changing a lot, but again, being a very visual platform,
right,
unless what you're sharing is really visual and aspirational, then the visual platforms like Pinterest and Instagram have got less of an application in this sort of environment.
So is there a way that you, and I don't know that measure is the right word, but how would you know that your efforts are being successful? You know, we're very well groomed in the return on the investment. Mm-hmm. If I'm going to give it a half an hour a week or a couple of hours a week or whatever the number is, what will I get? How will I know that I'm making progress? Are there measures that you use?
Look, we get really caught up in this return on investment piece. And what I say, sometimes not very popularly, in boardrooms, sometimes I'll say, you know, email and telephone are just a part of doing business now. We don't try and measure the return on investment of those technologies.
Fair call.
Social media is another communication platform. So the general activity of developing online communities in social media needs to be seen as part of doing business. And then when you're doing advertising campaigns for particular products, and there's no doubt that any kind of marketing material gets far less reach because of the words, and the algorithm, you know, filters those out.
Right.
That's the kind of content you want to pay for, is your direct marketing messages. And all of the insights and analytics that are available through all of the platforms around paid advertising absolutely demonstrate a return on investment. So you can see that for $20 you got 45 people that clicked through to your website, and if you put a conversion pixel there, then you can see how many of those purchased the book that you were advertising, and you can then see how many of them saw the ad that starts showing up on Facebook because they visited your website. So that return on investment piece is very easy to measure when you're talking about paid advertising.
Okay.
So the organic part needs to be seen as part of doing business.
Right. So again, that goes back to what you said right at the beginning. If you count it as a separate silo and you try to isolate it, you're more or less doing yourself a disservice, because then it sounds like it's extra rather than it's just part of the way business is today.
And you're much better off having a small group of highly engaged individuals that care about what you're saying and what you're doing, than having a large following of people go out and buy 10,000 fans in Russia. They're probably never going to buy your product. So, you know, you're much better off having 100 people who actually care about what you do.
I heard that Katy Perry has 23 million followers on Twitter, so maybe that's where we should get started.
Yeah,
we'll all buddy
Don't
up.
use that as a benchmark unless you're Katy Perry.
Unless you're really special. So if we're in the learning and development space, and a lot of social media tends to be focused on the how do you get to your client, how do you get to the marketplace, are there ways that you've seen learning and development professionals or professionals in our space where they've been able to use the technology or use the social media platforms as a part of their business rather than just as a reach to the market?
Yeah, absolutely. So closed groups is a really obvious one, both on LinkedIn and on Facebook.
Okay.
They can make great learning environments, great collaborative learning environments. So
Right.
to encourage students to share their learning journey or to ask questions. Interestingly, I did some work with a tech company a couple of years ago with their customer service team. And I got a phone call one day from the head of marketing saying, we've just had a meeting with all the managers and you're not very popular. And I was like, what have I done? I don't like those kind of phone calls. And he said, well, we've built this great community for our customers, but they're all answering their own questions and we're answering each other's questions and our customer service team can't get in quickly enough. I thought, gee, that's a good problem to have.
Yeah, right.
Now, of course, they have a role to play to make sure that the information that's being shared is accurate.
Sure.
But what an awesome outcome to have a community of people who are collaborating and sharing information and actually taking the focus, getting the brand out of the middle of the conversation and creating that environment. So finding a way to empower students or people who are learning with us.
Participants or delegates, sure.
Yeah, whoever
Okay.
they are, finding an environment where they can do that. Now, the magic sauce, I guess, if you like, is to find a way to do that that also markets your products and your services.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes it needs to be a closed group to protect the content that's being discussed or the privacy of the people or to keep that as a closed environment. But if you can find a way to make that public, then you're actually demonstrating the learning environment that people will come into when they purchase your product.
Right.
Or your
so,
service.
in a sense, you could almost create a space where they can sample the product. Kind of like, when you go to the baker and they've got the little tray of cut up,
Cheesy might scroll.
Yeah, right. Take a bite and then you'll probably buy 6 of them. But if people can see this environment because it's a low cost from a point of entry, but it's got high value because they can immediately sense the service that you're providing.
Yeah.
Right.
And, some of the things we're doing with some of our education provider clients is things like live video streaming from the practical components. So, we have a client that teaches dog and horse massage and they get a certification from that. So we'll go to the training or to the practical and we'll live stream on Facebook and we'll plan in the lead up and let people know that we're going to do that. And then people can see in action the students actually massaging the dogs or taking them in the hydrotherapy pool.
So they can
So they're actually
observe.
learning alongside the student. Now, they don't get the qualification from doing that, but they get an inside view into what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
We've also set up some great systems around staff learning within organisations. So even a secret Facebook group where people share their experiences, share a win each week, share the biggest challenge that they're dealing with each week.
Mm-hmm.
So you can certainly get a lot of internal learning. And then there's all the enterprise platforms like Yammer and Slack.
I was about to say that if you can then help navigate into the internal world, then you actually grow your market within a very controlled space. So being on top of Slack or Yammer is an opportunity to then say, I can be publishing within that business, create some energy and some momentum.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah. And, at public events, having a hashtag that groups the conversation is also, I can't tell you how many digital conferences I speak at where they still don't share the Twitter handle of the people who are speaking.
Right.
And it's like, we're at a social media conference. put the Twitter handle on
There's
the
something
name
missing.
tag.
That's right.
And, particularly around events, capturing people's social media details as part of the registration process. Again, saying we're really looking forward to and naming 3 or 4 Twitter handles of people who are attending.
Mm-hmm.
Again, you're broadening that reach, so connecting with participants before they even join the event. Lots of ways to use social media in the learning environment.
So it sounds to me like from a social media perspective, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. I mean, there are experts like yourself who can help us collapse the learning curve, and yet there are still things that we can each do, which allows us to both expand our brand or expand our presence in the digital space, but not necessarily break the back of what we're trying to do because we still have to earn the revenue. And I like the way you gave us some ideas around, or at least I've taken away some ideas around how I can use this to reach farther to the market. And as we talked during the break, it's not about giving away everything for free. You do keep the secret sauce because that's what we bring to each one of our clients. But we have the clients get to know us faster so that we don't have to do the cold call, which is typically something that is a stretch. But the payoff is that we can still apply the same technology as a part of our method in learning and development, which means it's not just a front-end marketing engine. It's actually
Absolutely.
something we can apply and then build on the back of that. It's a way to grow those relationships.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for taking some time out. It's great to have you on the Learning Couch. We'll probably check in with you in the near future to see how life is in the fast lane. It's been great having you here as part of the audience. Thank you guys for being here, and thank you for watching and tuning in. Look forward to seeing you on the next On the Learning Couch.